There are places in this world that exist on the edge of memory, forgotten by maps, untouched by time, and quietly avoided by those who know better. They aren't marked with warning signs. They don't appear in tourist guides or review blogs. But they exist, and those who stumble into them often return changed. If they return at all. Behind every charming cabin deep in the woods, every crumbling church locked from the inside, every old hotel with rooms no longer rented, there's a silence that feels too heavy, a stillness that presses against the chest like a held breath. Some say it's superstition, others say it's psychological, but listen closely to the people who've been there, those who walked through those places alone. They described things they weren't supposed to see, voices they didn't recognize, shadows that moved when nothing else did. And it always starts the same way: a casual visit, an overnight stay, a dare, a documentary, a wrong turn. What they found was something ancient, watching, waiting. These are their stories, unedited, unpolished, and far too real for comfort. Before you pack your bags for your next quiet escape, ask yourself, what if something is waiting on the other side of that locked door, and it doesn't want to be alone? Caleb Atwine arrived just before the rains, early August 2019. The village, a scatter of thatched huts and clay walls, lay folded into the green ridges of Uganda's eastern borderlands. He had been sent there on a research grant to document intangible spiritual heritage, a phrase his professors loved but never defined. Caleb was 25, idealistic, and eager to find meaning in forgotten places. The village elders tolerated him. They answered his questions about river spirits and burial chants with clipped patience. He listened by firelight, recorded every word, annotated each symbol etched onto clay jars and ancestral masks. He was gentle with his questions, never interrupting. But then, too early, he asked about the well. He hadn't even seen it yet. Just heard the name whispered during a lull in conversation: Ikitaba Ekataliko Matsi, the well without water. The change was immediate. One elder fell silent mid-sentence. Another stood up and left the gathering. The women who had been weaving bark cloth began humming quietly, as if to drown out what had been said. Caleb noted it all. The tension, the retreat, the avoidance. He wrote, "Mention of the dry well elicits collective discomfort, possibly taboo?" 2 days later, curiosity won. He left just before sunrise, his pack slung over one shoulder. Inside, a camera, a field recorder, a half-filled journal, and a small flashlight. The path, if you could call it that, led through banana groves and bramble thick enough to draw blood. His arms were scratched, his boots caked with red mud. Then he reached the clearing. The well didn't look cursed, just old. The stone was cracked but firm, its rim covered in moss and the remnants of faded handprints, red, white, and something like ochre. Around it, broken calabashes, fragments of glass beads, charred feathers in heaps that looked like old offerings. There was no bucket, no pulley, only darkness inside, yawning downward deep and still. He set the recorder on the edge and muttered his opening notes. The audio later revealed something strange, a second voice. Faint, rhythmic, speaking behind him in a language no one could identify. But Caleb didn't hear it at the time. He was already lowering his flashlight into the well, angling it between the cracks, watching as the beam revealed not water, but stone steps. Steps that spiraled downward, carved into the earth, smooth, deliberate, and ancient. He hesitated. Then he climbed in. The first thing Caleb noticed as he descended was the temperature. It dropped sharply, unnaturally. Not the gentle cool of damp stone, but a hollow, almost metallic chill that clung to his skin. The steps, wide enough for only 1 foot at a time, coiled tightly like a funnel. Their surfaces were smooth, worn down not by water, but by repetition, by footsteps. His own echoed with each careful move downward. He paused every few seconds to tap the walls with his flashlight, keeping balance, muttering timestamp notes into his recorder. Descending what appears to be a man-made spiral tunnel, he whispered. No signs of water, though the base is visibly wet. Carvings on the walls resemble glyphs, but unfamiliar. The light trembled against the stone. The carvings were shallow but precise, eyes, hundreds of them, all along the wall. Some were wide open, others tightly shut. One was elongated vertically like it had been screaming. The deeper he went, the more the air changed. It wasn't just colder, it felt heavy, like walking underwater. Breathing became effort, and then the sounds began. At first, he thought it was wind threading through the tunnel behind him. But wind doesn't echo with rhythm. This did. A low repetition of syllables, 4 beats, a pause for more. It was almost song-like, but off-key, broken somehow. He stopped walking. The sound stopped too. He spoke into his recorder again, but his voice cracked, hearing something. Vocal, unclear if internal or external source. Attempting to proceed. The spiral gave way to a narrow stone threshold that opened into a circular chamber. Caleb stepped in slowly. The walls were covered in soot and moss, yet beneath them were more carvings, ritualistic in style, geometric and precise, forming a pattern that seemed to twist if you stared too long. Bones littered the ground. Not piled, not scattered, arranged. Some formed rings. Others were placed in symmetrical clusters. Each set had a small shard of obsidian or red glass pressed into the center of what used to be a chest. There were no animal skulls, only human ones. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar just waist high. Upon it, a single object, a bowl carved from what appeared to be volcanic rock, filled with thick, stagnant water that reflected nothing. Caleb stepped closer. The whispering resumed, but this time it was behind him, and the recorder, still resting on the edge of the well above, began picking up sounds it shouldn't have. Soft scratching, breathing, and a second set of footsteps following him down. Caleb stood frozen, the breath in his chest held hostage by the silence that followed the whispers. He turned slowly, half expecting to find someone standing at the mouth of the chamber. There was no one, but something had changed. The chamber no longer felt empty. The air had weight, a presence, the kind you don't see but sense just past the edges of vision. And the more he tried to dismiss it, the stronger it grew. His flashlight flickered briefly, casting erratic shadows across the walls. For a moment, the carvings of the eyes seemed to move, just slightly, like lids fluttering open. He moved backward toward the wall, his recorder still clipped to his shirt, whispering automatic updates like a man trying to hold on to reason. Subject is in shrine-like structure beneath dry well, experiencing auditory phenomena, possible carbon exposure, hallucination. Documenting but preparing to exit. Then came the humming. It didn't rise. It didn't echo. It simply appeared, like it had been there all along, but only now became audible. A deep, throaty hum. Female, maybe. Layered. Notes that never fully resolved, as though sung by voices without lungs. Caleb stepped away from the altar. The bowl of dark water began to tremble, subtly, like something was stirring beneath the surface. But there was no vibration on the stone slab beneath it. No physical cause. He pointed the camera toward it and leaned in. The frame, later recovered, caught a single ripple forming in the water, moving not outward, but inward toward the center. And then a shape. Only visible for 3 frames, a long, pale hand rising from beneath the surface, palm open, fingers extended upward in offering or beckoning. He couldn't tell which. The fingers were thin, impossibly long, jointed in places where human hands aren't. Caleb gasped and stumbled back. His foot struck a femur, sending him to the floor. The flashlight spun out of reach. The beam danced wildly, briefly illuminating the upper arches of the chamber, revealing something standing in the shadows. It didn't move. It didn't blink. But its silhouette wasn't natural. 7 feet tall, head tilted too far, arms hanging by its sides, its form partially hidden by stone. The shadows seemed to cling to it. Like it wasn't just in the dark, it was made of it. And still, the humming never stopped. Caleb began to crawl backward, whispering a prayer under his breath, one he barely remembered from childhood. His hand brushed over one of the bones. It was warm, as if it had only just been left there. The humming deepened into a guttural chant, low, resonant, and layered as if 100 voices were singing the same note from different directions. It pressed in from every angle. Caleb's ears rang with pressure. His vision blurred around the edges. Shapes stretched unnaturally in the periphery, as though the walls themselves were bending inward. He staggered to his feet. The figure in the corner was gone. In its place, darkness, impossibly black. A void that didn't reflect light. It didn't seem like a shadow. It looked like a tear in the world, like space had split open, and what lay beyond wasn't meant to be seen. The carvings on the wall began to move. Slowly at first, then more fluidly, the eyes blinking in sequence like some massive, breathing organism. The floor beneath him pulsed, not shook, but moved, as if something underneath the stone was shifting, stretching, waking. And then came the whisper. This time, it was inside his head. "Let us see." He clutched his skull. It wasn't a thought. It was a voice, a consciousness, pressing itself into his. He backed away, eyes darting for the way out. But the entrance tunnel was gone. The spiral staircase no longer existed. Only the chamber remained, and behind him the altar. The bowl still full of water that did not reflect. Caleb turned slowly. In the surface of the water, he saw a face. Not his own. It blinked. He screamed and knocked the bowl to the ground. It shattered, but there was no splash. The water poured out thickly like oil, soaking into the stone without a trace. Then the chamber shuddered. A sound like breathing came from the walls. Not air, but stone inhaling. The chamber exhaled dust, grit, and the long, deep groan of something ancient shifting position after centuries of stillness. And then came the hand again, from the floor this time. It slid up through the cracks in the altar's base, fingers slow, deliberate, searching. A second hand followed, gripping the stone. Then came part of a face, gray, eyeless, the skin stretched tightly over bone. The mouth was far too wide, and it was smiling. Caleb ran. He doesn't remember how. Not the chamber, not the stairs, not the forest path. He was found 6 days later, barefoot and bruised, crouched beneath a fig tree at the edge of the village with torn clothes and dirt under his fingernails. His lips moved silently. His eyes didn't blink. When he was finally able to speak, the only words he repeated over and over were, "It was never a well. It was a door." Caleb was hospitalized for dehydration, severe exhaustion, and something the admitting nurse simply described as disassociation too deep for words. He didn't respond to his name for days. When he did, he was different. He spoke in fragments, not about where he'd been, but about what he had become. He said things like, "I remember their names now," and they spoke in shapes, not words. His journal was recovered, water-damaged and half-torn. Several pages had been deliberately ripped out. Others were filled with symbols no linguist has been able to categorize. What little remained legible included entries like, "Not a burial site, a seal. They can't cross while we remember the shape. One opened its mouth, and I heard my own voice from years ago." The camera footage, once dismissed as corrupted, was later stabilized by a forensic team. The final frames are deeply unsettling. After Caleb knocks over the bowl, the footage catches a flicker of movement behind him, on the wall. A figure, half emerged from the stone, appears to watch him flee. Its limbs remain embedded in the rock, but its head turns, and then the camera cuts. The villagers never explained why they agreed, just 2 days later, to seal the well completely. For generations, they had left it alone. But now they mixed concrete, reinforced the rim with metal bars, and posted signs in both English and Uganda. The message was short: do not dig. Sacred ground. One elder, when asked by a journalist, simply said, "It's not about keeping us out anymore." Caleb never finished his dissertation. He withdrew from the university, changed his phone number, and moved to an undisclosed location with family. But every now and then, according to his brother, Caleb still wakes up at 3:17 a.m., screaming. Not in fear, but in a language no one else understands. The medical reports note no prior history of mental illness. But one handwritten comment from a night nurse stands out. "Patient keeps repeating, 'It remembers me. It's looking for another way up.'" And if you ask the villagers now, those who still live nearby, they'll tell you that the earth there has started to crack again. Just slightly. And some nights, if the air is still enough, they hear a voice rising through the dirt, asking the same question. "Will you open the door?" In the hills of southern Italy, just outside the town of Potenza, stands an abandoned 17th century monastery. Cracked marble steps, ivy-choked corridors, and faded frescoes still cling to the walls like half-forgotten prayers. For decades, the building sat untouched, a relic of war, decay, and silence, until a man named Luca Moretti arrived. Luca was a sculptor in his early 40s. After suffering a nervous breakdown in Rome following the death of his sister, he withdrew from the public eye entirely. He claimed the city was too loud, that the statues he carved were listening back, and that every reflection he saw in a mirror blinked a half-second too late. When he saw a listing for the monastery, cheap, remote, and privately owned, he made the purchase in cash within a week. The locals warned him about it. Not directly, not superstitiously, just quietly. The woman at the market asked him to stop whistling when he mentioned where he was staying. The old man who delivered firewood wouldn't cross the iron gate. The parish priest said nothing, but crossed himself every time Luca walked past the chapel ruins. Luca didn't care. He welcomed the isolation, the silence, the lack of distractions. But the silence inside that monastery wasn't normal. On his third week there, while restoring plaster in the bell tower, he noticed a seam in the stonework, just behind the ancient bronze bell. The mortar was newer, the stone out of place. A section of wall had been rebuilt, and behind it, as he would later discover, was a door. No handle, no keyhole, just a padlock, rusted, ancient, and completely sealed in concrete. Luca broke the lock with a hammer. He stepped inside, and from that moment on, the bell, silent for nearly a century, began to ring. The room behind the bell was small, 6 by 6 feet at most, a chamber within the stone wall, completely sealed until the day Luca broke it open. The walls were scorched black, not from time or decay, but from deliberate burning. Thin layers of soot clung to the mortar like residue from candle smoke. On the floor, nearly lost beneath the dust, lay the remains of dozens of melted stubs, candles that had once been lit in ritual. In the center of the room stood a single wooden chair. It was old, monastic in design, with a high back and flat seat. Buckled leather straps dangled from its arms and legs. Luca stared at the chair for a long time, then at the far wall. There, carved directly into the stone, was a mural, faded but still discernible. A figure in a nun's habit, face featureless, arms outstretched. Beneath it, etched in Latin, ut tacit oratio, ut tacit lingua. He translated it later. Let the prayer fall silent. Let the tongue be still. That night, for the first time since moving in, the bell rang. Once, loud, not a mechanical clang, but a low, thunderous sound that echoed through the valley like something waking from under stone. Luca tried to dismiss it. The wind, he told himself, a loose beam, the metal shifting with the night air. But each night it rang again. One time, always at 3:13 a.m. Soon he stopped sleeping. He began sculpting again, but the figures were different. They came to him quickly, violently. He didn't sketch. He didn't plan. He would wake from blackouts with clay beneath his nails and half-finished pieces around him. They all looked the same, veiled women, hands bound, mouths missing. He tried covering the room behind the bell. He blocked it with wood, then stone, then iron bars he welded himself. But still the bell rang. He began to hear whispers, barely audible at first, Latin prayers reversed. A voice behind his left shoulder that vanished when he turned. And the sculpture in the corner, the one he didn't remember making, seemed to shift just slightly whenever he looked away. Over the next several weeks, the bell rang every night without fail, always at 3:13 a.m., always just once. Luca began to dread the sound, and yet he couldn't sleep until he heard it. It had become a ritual, unwanted, unexplainable, but precise. He even tried staying awake in the bell tower one night to see if the wind or rusted gears could be the cause. Nothing moved. The bell sat still. But when the clock struck 3:13, the sound came. Deep, resonant, and close, impossibly close. He felt it vibrate in his spine, but the bell didn't move. The next morning, he found dirt on the tower floor, just a few dry streaks near the wall. He swept it away, but the following day it returned, more of it darker, clumped. It wasn't dust. It smelled of rotten stone, like something unearthed after decades of sleep. That same week, Luca started hearing movement inside the walls. Soft at first, like shifting fabric or breathing. Then scratching. Then footsteps. Not scurrying like rats. Slow. Measured. One evening, while sculpting, he dropped his chisel. As he bent to pick it up, he caught a reflection in the brass of the tool. Behind him, just beyond the doorway, a figure stood in shadow. A nun, or something wearing a habit. He spun around. No one was there. He searched the monastery from top to bottom, locked every door, shouted into the halls until his voice cracked. But the silence that followed was worse than any answer. That night, he set up a camera in the bell tower, facing the sealed room. At 3:13 a.m., the bell rang again. When he reviewed the footage the next morning, the recording cut out exactly 3 seconds before the chime. When the video resumed, the door he had welded shut was open. No damage to the bars. No sign of tampering. Just wide open. And in the center of the room, the chair had turned, facing outward, as if something had been sitting there, watching. 3 days after the footage of the open door, Luca stopped answering calls. His family hadn't heard from him in weeks. The postman reported packages piling at the gate. The few villagers who still passed the monastery claimed the bell had begun ringing twice now. Not once. Always at 3:13 a.m., then again at 3:17. On the night of his disappearance, security footage from a roadside camera caught Luca driving erratically into town at nearly 2 a.m. His eyes were wild, his face pale and wet with sweat. He stopped outside the church in the village square, banged on the locked door, and left a statue on the steps. A woman in a veil. No eyes, no mouth. Then he returned to the monastery. According to investigators, he left a journal on his work table with just 4 words on the final page. She is still speaking. That same night, the camera in the bell tower recorded its last footage. At exactly 3:13, the bell rang again, this time with visible motion. The beam shifted, the clapper swung. The entire tower shook. And when it stopped, the door to the sealed chamber opened once more. This time, something stepped out. The frame is blurry. The light is poor. But one figure is unmistakably visible, robed, tall, hands folded, head tilted at a grotesque angle. Where the face should be, there is only blankness, smooth, stretched skin where eyes and mouth should have been. The footage ends. When police entered the monastery 3 days later, they found no sign of Luca. No signs of struggle. Just one thing out of place. The altar in the ruined chapel, which had been untouched for over a century, now bore a fresh sculpture. A veiled nun, kneeling. Her stone hands were clasped in prayer. But if you looked closely, you could see something unnatural beneath the folds of the veil. Something watching from behind the stone. The sculpture has since been removed, but priests report hearing tapping from inside the storage crate. Just once a night, always at 3:13, the sculpture was transported under heavy cloth and sealed in a wooden crate marked for ecclesiastical storage, no public access. But the priests assigned to its safekeeping began to report strange phenomena. One said he heard scratching from within the crate at night. Another claimed the chapel smelled faintly of myrrh and rotting flowers when he passed near the storage chamber. Within a week, the oldest among them, Father Johnny, suffered a stroke during evening prayer. In his final conscious moments, he tried to speak, but couldn't form words. He only repeated one gesture, over and over, 2 fingers against his lips, then pointing toward the crate. Silence. Let the tongue be still. The artifact was eventually transferred to the Vatican's Undercroft collections. It was reclassified not as religious sculpture, but as anomalous devotional relic. It has not been seen publicly since. As for Luca Moretti, his disappearance remains unresolved. No remains were found. No signs of suicide or travel. He simply vanished. But weeks after the case went cold, his sister's former caregiver received a strange envelope in the mail. It was unmarked and contained no note, just a black and white photo. A sculpture, a woman kneeling in a bell tower. But this version was slightly different from the one recovered. This time, the veil was pulled halfway up. You could see part of the face beneath. It looked almost human, but wrong. Elongated, mouth open, screaming. Audio experts later analyzed the bell tower recordings from Luca's security system. After enhancing the background noise, they discovered layers of low-frequency sound buried beneath the bell's chime. When isolated and slowed, a voice emerges. A woman's voice. Latin, spoken backward. Translated loosely, it reads, "He opened the door. He offered the shape. Now we walk again." The Vatican has made no official comment, but those who have visited the monastery since say the bell tower still stands. Empty, and if you pass beneath it in the early hours before dawn, some swear they hear 2 sounds, first the bell, then a voice very faint, whispering just behind your ear, "Confess." In the heart of Buenos Aires, nestled between colonial buildings and sleek boutiques, stands a boutique hotel with minimalist charm and perfect online reviews. The kind of place influencers love: exposed brick, handmade linens, rooftop bar with panoramic views. No one mentions what's beneath it. The land the hotel was built on once belonged to a mental institution that opened in 1912. At the time, it was considered revolutionary, a modern home for the mentally unwell, the papers wrote. But by the 1930s, the headlines changed. Patients missing, screaming heard from basement wards, bodies found under foundation, unrecorded, unnamed. The government shut it down in 1941 and sealed the lower floors. The upper structure was demolished, and for decades, the land remained untouched. Then came the investors. In 2018, a private development group opened Hotel Avellana, branding it as a refuge for the soul. What they didn't publicize was that part of the original hospital foundation had to be preserved for legal reasons. Thick concrete walls, iron doors, and winding corridors that couldn't be destroyed without risking collapse. They sealed it, renovated above it, and kept quiet. Clara Medina, a travel vlogger known for her Haunted Stays series, checked in just 2 years after the hotel opened. She documented her visit on Instagram stories, shared her room tour on TikTok, and scheduled a YouTube upload for the following Sunday. She never posted that video. What follows is a reconstruction, pulled from her last known footage, audio extracted from her mobile device, and notes recovered from her hotel room. Clara went in search of a story, and found something that had been waiting to be remembered. Clara arrived on a Thursday afternoon, checked in without incident, and documented everything like she always did. Soft cinematic pans of the bed, wide-angle shots of the hallways, a short reel of the staff smiling at the front desk. Her caption read, "Hotel Avellana, clean, minimal, slightly eerie in the best way. Let's see what the night brings." Eyes black heart, but that night she didn't sleep. The sound began around 2:40 a.m., soft at first, like dragging fabric or a barefoot shuffle on tile. At 2:47, she pressed record on her phone and whispered, "Okay, I think someone's walking in the hallway. Like slow, but not going anywhere, just pacing." She opened her door. The corridor was empty. The next morning, she told the concierge. They offered to move her room, but she declined. She'd heard strange sounds before. Hotels had history. Besides, she told her followers, haunted stay rule number 1, never move rooms. Ghosts hate that. You stay put and let them talk. That evening, she explored the hotel's lower level. The elevator didn't go there, but a fire exit stairwell led down to a rusted metal door marked maintenance only. It was locked. She noted it in her vlog script. They say it's just old pipework down there, but the hotel was built on something older. Something they didn't demolish. I want to see it. At 3:13 a.m., the audio on her phone captured something else. A knock. Not on her room door, but on the wall beside her bed. 3 times. Slow, rhythmic, and then silence. Then the sound of a doorknob turning. Clara whispered, "It's not my door. It's the one in the wall." She tried to laugh it off, but the next morning she posted nothing, and her camera footage stopped mid-recording, just as she stepped into the stairwell one final time. The next piece of Clara's story came from raw, corrupted footage salvaged from her memory card. It begins abruptly in the stairwell, dimly lit by a single overhead bulb that pulses faintly every few seconds. She's breathing heavily, whispering into the lens. "Okay, I got the key," or something close. Night shift guy left the latch undone when he brought supplies down. "I'm going in. This door hasn't been opened in a long time. Look at this rust." The door creaks open. The flashlight mounted to her camera flickers. Beyond it, a corridor, not part of the hotel's blueprint. Brick-lined, the floor still laid with cracked white tile. Wheelchair tracks etched into the dust. Stained stretchers pushed against the wall. Old Sainigi en Spanish, observación, contención, sin visitas permitidas. The air seems thicker, heavier. Her breathing grows shallow. She follows the hallway deeper, murmuring her findings. The audio picks up a low humming in the background, not mechanical, but human. A chorus, barely audible. And then she stops speaking altogether. The camera tilts as she lowers it. Her flashlight catches something ahead. A steel door, half open, marked Unidad 3A. On the wall beside it, scratch marks. Not carved with a knife, but with fingernails. Below it, smeared across the tiles, is a single word written in something faded and brown. Ayadame. "Help me." Her breathing quickens. The footage cuts briefly, then resumes, static crackling, the audio lagging behind. She's in a large room now. The walls are padded, torn in places. Chains dangle from hooks in the ceiling. In the corner, an overturned medical cart and a child's music box playing a tune that doesn't resolve. Something moves just beyond the camera's reach. A figure? A shadow? There's a whisper. Not from her. A deep male voice, impossible to place. It says her name. Twice. Then laughter. Not loud, but wrong. A childlike giggle with a rasp beneath it. The frame freezes on her turning to run. Her face is blurred by motion, but in her eyes, you can see the realization. She's not exploring anymore. She's trapped. The last uninterrupted footage from Clara's camera spans just under 3 minutes. But those minutes are unlike anything else in her archive. Her pace quickens, her voice is gone, and the lighting degrades in erratic pulses, like someone flicking the current off and on from behind the walls. The camera jerks violently as she runs. but her direction is unclear. The corridor appears to loop, same chairs, same blood-smeared tiles, same rusting signs, but mirrored reversed. She passes a room marked Observation B 3 times. Each time, the door is slightly more ajar. Behind her, faint footsteps. Not chasing, just following. Patient. Measured. Then, her flashlight dies. The screen plunges into darkness. For 10 seconds, there's only the sound of her panicked breathing, and then a soft whimper. Not hers. A child. The light blinks back on. She's in a room she didn't enter. Walls lined with gurneys, restraints hanging from overhead rails. A mirror spans the far wall, cracked. In the reflection, Clara stands alone. But behind her, a figure, pale, gaunt, wearing a hospital gown stained with something dark and dry. Head tilted unnaturally, eyes wide, mouth slack. And it's not moving in sync with her. It blinks. Slowly. The reflection opens its mouth wide. Too wide. Unnaturally wide. A sound begins, high-pitched, mechanical, like a recording of a scream played in reverse. Clara turns, but the room behind her is empty. She gasps. The screen fractures. Horizontal lines distort the image. She screams now a single word. No, the camera shakes. Falls. Her feet are seen dragging across the frame, toes scraping the tile. Then silence. The screen glitches. Then shows one final image. A close-up of the padded wall. Scratched into the surface in uneven, frantic lines. Some doors open both ways. The footage ends. The timestamp reads 3:17 a.m. No exit footage exists. Clara was never seen leaving the hotel. Her room was found unlocked, untouched, camera missing, phone shattered beneath her bed. But in the hotel's boiler room, tucked behind a stack of old linens, police found a single object, her name tag. Bent, cracked, burned around the edges, as if it had been in a fire. But no fire had been reported. After Clara's disappearance, Hotel Avellana cooperated with authorities, for a time. Police searched every guest room, reviewed all security footage, and brought in dogs to scan the lower levels. Nothing. The old medical wing beneath the hotel was officially labeled inaccessible, citing structural instability. But no one explained why the hotel's own blueprints included reinforced doors, cameras, and newly installed lighting in the supposedly condemned area. One staff member, anonymous, later came forward. He told investigators that a week before Clara vanished, a contractor had been hired to investigate strange electrical failures on the bottom floor. The man entered the stairwell and didn't come back. His tools were later found in the hallway. His clipboard bore one note: "The walls are breathing." Clara's final upload never published, but fragments of her video data synced to a cloud backup. The files were corrupted, but metadata showed something strange. At 3:17 a.m. on the morning of her disappearance, her phone's location pinged not inside the hotel, but several meters beneath it, in a space not mapped. When journalists pressed the hotel's management for comment, they deflected, referring to a tragic guest incident and citing respect for the family's privacy. But quietly, room 203, the room Clara stayed in, was removed from their booking site. The door remains locked. Guests who've stayed nearby report strange occurrences: scratching inside the wall, soft crying that seems to come from beneath the bed, mirrors fogging over despite working ventilation. One guest left a single-line review before deleting their account. There's another hotel underneath this one. Today, if you walk past the back of Hotel Avellana, near the rusted stairwell marked maintenance, you'll find a new sign bolted to the wall. It doesn't say "Do not enter." It doesn't mention danger. It simply reads, "Don't answer if it knocks." Locals say if you stand there long enough, especially after 3 a.m., you'll hear it. 3 soft knocks, then a whisper. "We still remember your name." Which of these stories will haunt you tonight? Drop a comment, and if you've ever heard a knock you couldn't explain, you're not alone. Like, subscribe, and remember, some doors stay closed for a reason.